Yeah, so you were saying about the experimenting with magic when you were a small kid.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, we all have these experiences that kind of drop breadcrumbs for us, and we follow them like we're supposed to. And it kind of happened like that, me getting into magic at such a young age. But throughout my entire life, I mean, I've had the entire gamut of experiences, paranormal experiences, and um, I guess, I mean, if you want to, you could include UFO experiences in that same category. Um, and then, like, just exploring, I've explored synchronicities and, um, I mean, just all kinds of anomalous things. And I think that that happens when you actively try to engage um, creativity, it, being an artist. And I think it's more prevalent for those kinds of people who are the creative types. Sometimes I don't like to say creative types because that sounds like kind of cliche, kind of like, oh, he's so creative,
Exclusive group.
um but for people who are, genuinely, authentically trying to um, figure something out, who are seekers, and I think any real artist or musician or whatever um, is a seeker, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to pull that thing out and try to come to terms with it. And it's whether it's the battle within themselves or the battle with an idea or a thought or um, a principle that they live by. Um, so I mean, we can go in all kinds of directions from this kind of stepping stone if you want.
Mm.
It's kind of up to you. Like, I'm like totally open to like going in any direction. So
I think we have a very nice dynamic. Uh, we we appear to think similarly, and that's so great to find a like-minded and a like spirited person as well. Uh,
cool.
Everything we've been talking before we started recording was so awesome that yeah, I think it's great that we started recording it. Um, for example, this idea of supernatural and what I think you used, paranormal was the word you used, and
Paranormal.
like those all those kind of experiences, those maybe we could call them like edge experiences, or it kind of reminded me or made me think about how you were speaking earlier about as a creative, the idea of the blank canvas, right? And
Yeah.
you connected with the void, perhaps in the Buddhist sense,
Yeah.
and that also brought up the idea of the abyss that Nietzsche talks about, and that interacting with that canvas, with that blank piece of paper, with the silence before the music, um, that that in a way you're looking at the piece of paper, but it's also looking at you. So
Hmm.
all your fears, all your self judgments will also be like in a way represented by that openness, by that full potential that the blank piece of paper represents, and how at the same time this connection with creativity is yeah, we were speaking that it's kind of like a membrane or like a gradient between self and other, or
Yeah.
between our small ego identity and our perhaps our more absolute, um,
Higher
expanded
self, or yeah.
entire self, yeah, Brahman, right?
Hmm.
The existence absolute, and and this these limit experiences like paranormal stuff, supernatural magic, perhaps even psychedelics, synchronicities, UFOs. They feel like, in a way, like like they are kind of uh, poking at that membrane also. Just
Yeah.
like the artist presses the pen on the paper, the writer, or um, the seeker, even if they are not pursuing an artistic um, way of expressing themselves, when when exploring the limits of reality, of experience, just like you connect with, or you find on the as a reflection, these experiences, these strange out there experiences
Yeah.
that seem impossible. I've also had similar experiences. I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous conversation, but when I was around the same age that you started doing magic, I was, I think, I don't know, 10 or 11, something like that. Let me see. Yeah, probably 11. Uh, I was staying. I went to sleep over at a friend's house, and I remember uh, waking up in the morning after having gone to bed, waking up, and when I wake up, I look at the feet of my bed, and from outside of the room, from the door, comes this purple smoke comes in, and on the smoke there's a small purple genie sitting like this. The little guy looks at me. He doesn't say or do anything specific, just looks at me and turns around and goes floating again with his smoke outside of the room, and exits the scene, let's say. And that's an experience that's always been with me, and it's probably marked my personality very much since then. And I've always been super interested in, or super uh, attracted to, and curious about
Hmm.
all the weird things that are possible in life. Uh, that's something that I could have been sort of in between dreaming and awake, but at the same time, I felt totally awake. It was like as real as any other experience I've ever had.
Yeah.
And those kind of things are like the artist poking at the page, at the blank canvas with his paint, and bringing out from the other side something that wasn't there, or that. And this also makes me think, somebody describing the caves in Europe. I think it's in Spain, those caves with the hand paintings and the
Oh
very
yeah. And
ancient.
yeah, in France.
Yeah, and somebody described the hand that you see painted on the stone as if it was the hand of somebody that's on the other side, pressed against the stone, looking
Oh yeah.
this way.
Nice. I like that idea. Um, yeah, almost like that we're, at times that we play the role of the blank canvas for the other,
Mm,
and and all these anomalous experiences that we have, you know, they could just be expressions from the other side, you know, um, where whatever the other side is um, finds finds its muse within us, and that's how it gets to interact and relay its ideas. I think the mistake too many times with a lot of people is that they look at these things in a materialistic sense, um, or some kind of, not necessarily from the skeptical mind, but from the rationalist, materialist mind, um, the where that, when you talk of UFOs, we've been programmed to think that these are nuts and bolts, they're made of some kind of material and they're flying around and there's somebody inside there, and that they have to be from outer space or another planet or something. I don't, I've deconstructed a lot of my own um, beliefs in a lot of this stuff. Um, I mean, you can't help it when you're exploring and when you're trying to find answers, and you're interested in these types of things. You have you have your own experience, and then two, you have everything that everybody tells you of what it is or what it isn't. And um, there's the idea that um, that I think Jacques Vallée introduced in the 70s, that the UFO phenomenon has something to do with our consciousness, and that these are um, not necessarily beings from another planet coming here, but that they could very well be. And I think Jung talked about this too, that they're like manifestations of human consciousness, that kind of like tectonic plates that move and that create certain discharges, electrical discharges, or you have like this ball lightning, or there's always these stories of like these lights that are created, these earthquake lights, um, but something similar to that, that there's stresses and there's tension within the human being, and that comes through the mind, it comes through emotions, um, the intellect, that whatever is going on is on a much grander scale, that these things can manifest, and they're a direct result of, just like um, I'll say also that poltergeist activity, is quite often said to be the result of hormonal changes through children growing up, going through puberty, um, coming out of adolescence there. Uh, so in a lot of these instances where there's poltergeist activity, you'll often find that there's a teenager in the house, and during this whole shift of everything, it's affecting the environment in a physical way. Um, Things flying around, and um, other types of strange phenomena throughout the house or whatever. So I'm just trying to draw in like all these kinds of things that I think there is an art that is happening, and a lot of people don't look at it as an art form that's happening, but it's by an invisible hand, and it's that invisible hand at once is kind of, I think, extrudes from us, but it almost like um, reaches out to shake the hand that's coming through the veil, and together it creates these other things, and they can be frightening, they're weird, they're interesting. It's the high strangeness, and these are things that you can't necessarily call upon on demand. They happen when you least expect it. And that's just how it is when you sit down to try to write a song or sit down to create a work of art where you're not expecting it. And then all of a sudden, I mean, I've had songs that I've written that I think is like some of my, I'm like, wow, that's like one of the best things I ever wrote. And I had no intention of doing it. It came out of nowhere. And like the song wrote itself in 5 minutes. Or there can be other things where I'm just hanging on for, it could be weeks or months or even years that I've just got one little part, but it never found its place, and it never fully became realized, never came to fruition. And it's when those things of spontaneity happen, those creations that just come out of nowhere. That's like, getting hit over the head from the hand reaching out of the veil on the other side, that the void, the muse. And so like tying it in with all these paranormal occurrences, I think it runs parallel with that. Those experiences are almost on par with the creative experience, with the artistic experience, like that.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, it was a really powerful sharing that you just did. Um, mm, Something that came during your uh, your rant, let's call it. I remember, I don't know if you know Terence McKenna.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I remember listening to one of his talks, and at some point he says that the UFO is God's. In a text, like in Word, when you're writing, there's this what you call it, the cursor. So
Okay.
that the UFO is God's cursor in the world, so it can, like, when something supernatural, let's say, happens. I think that what he was trying to say is that the 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 other brings something like strange or weird to like edit the situation, like you would edit the word processor, and that's that's a really interesting idea also.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that. I've been a fan of McKenna for a long time. I don't think I've ever heard him say anything like that. I've read um I have the book, what is it, Food of the Gods, and um the whole incident at La Carrera, and where they actually saw like these craft while they were in the jungle there at the village, taking all these mushrooms and stuff. And towards the end there, they saw those, what appear to be physical UFOs. Um, so I know McKenna's talked about UFOs once in a while, but not very much. He was actually very opposed to the idea of UFOs in general. Um, but he ended up speaking, I think, like at a UFO conference, but I've never heard. I don't ever recall him talking about like kind of like I guess I would call it God's cursor, like like the hand of this coming in and being, it's almost after a sentence or a paragraph is typed out in reality form, that it's like there's a pause, and that UFO is like that flashing cursor right there at the end of the statement, just waiting for the next thing, for the next idea. Yeah, I like that. That's really cool.
kind of like a creative act from the other side to ours, rather than what we do from ours perhaps to the other. and
Yeah.
and like this cursor there and waiting, like you say, and suddenly perhaps God changes his mind, or our more expanded self changes our mind, so that cursor deletes something, and the way to delete it is to have a paranormal uh, not experience, a paranormal happening in the world that modifies the perception of those who see it, and therefore
Yeah.
changes the story a bit.
Yeah, that actually is really interesting. There's a phenomenon, what is known as the Oz factor. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's this type of feeling or environmental aesthetic that happens during like a UFO experience or some other type of high, strange, paranormal experience,
What did you call it?
where
The Oz, like the Wizard of Oz?
the Oz factor, yeah, like the Wizard of Oz, and that's exactly where it comes from.
Tell me more.
Where you're gonna look it up. So it's kind of like this, there's a distortion in time. There's you have feelings of maybe elation, or it's almost like you something else takes over, and there's like it's kind of hard to explain. It's a really weird thing that you enter into, like, and all of a sudden, it might be that all the birds stop singing, and there's like something weighing in the atmosphere, or there might be some kind of buzz, or um you know it, whatever happens, it allows for that. It almost seems like, you say, like, I could see it becoming like that, where it's this edit of reality. And in fact, that's during like this Oz factor, um, is when a lot of people end up experiencing missing time. And, a lot of people who claim to be abductees, you know, they experienced missing time. They were all of a sudden, they were just walking down the road, and they were 10 minutes away from their house or something. And then they come to, and it's like 4 hours later, and they have no idea what happened in between. And they might remember something of the Oz factor happening right before that, but then all of a sudden, something's different, something's changed, and they don't know, that space of time that's gone.
Kind of
So
like during synchronicities, that you have this. It's a very very personal, very subjective feeling of something's weird, something strange, and 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 lots of people feel that way. Well, I mean, I've had experiences of that kind. That's like synchronistic experiences that kind of just like this story I told you about the small purple genie.
yeah.
Stuff that kind of makes you question reality, makes you question how it actually works, what are the limits of it, like mm, like having an experience mm, when something out of the ordinary happens, and perhaps somebody else from the outside doesn't perceive it in the same way,
Hmm.
because it's like, well, they've I've heard synchronicity also explained uh, like like a kind of a message, like the universe is sending you a message. So you would have an experience, and it would be meaningful in a way for you, but the person sitting next to you would be having perhaps the same experience, and it wouldn't be. So this kind of Oz factor that you mentioned perhaps it can feel very subjective, and it can
Mhm.
be very meaningful as well. So
Yeah.
maybe the birds stop singing, right? And the person next to you doesn't really register them, but to you it's like, oh wow, the birds, what's happening? And suddenly something more weird happens, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Secret. I can see that. In the moment something like a synchronicity happens. Um, I guess before I dive into that a little bit more, that's another thing that I've been deconstructing is the synchronistic experience. And for the longest time, I always assumed that it was just a message from the universe saying like, "Hey, you're on the right path. Whatever you're doing, keep doing." You know, and um, what I started noticing though is that there is well, this might be a little far out, but that there are both uh, analog and digital types of synchronicities. And in my opinion, from what I've been seeing, is that in the last 20, 30 years, that there's been a rise in digital synchronicity, and the analog type synchronicity has been on the decline. Or maybe it's that analog synchronicity has never been very common and has maintained its regularity in occurrence, but that digital synchronicity has been taking dominance. And what I mean by these is that a digital synchronicity has a connection to a type of media, um, whether it be a movie or a song, or there's some element that is not part of the analog organic world. So for example, both my wife and I, just the other night, like 2 nights ago, we are outside and we were kind of looking up at the sky, and she said, "Oh, it seems like the conditions are right for a shooting star." And she didn't even get to fully pronounce the word star, where a big shooting star went right across the sky, and we both saw it, and it was like, whoa. That's what I would call an analog type of synchro, um, where there's nothing to do with any type of technology, or
It's something that happens out there in the natural world, in a way.
yes, it's analog, it's organic, um, and it's nothing but you and the other that happens. Now, the digital synchronicity could be that, um, I'll give you an example of one I've just had, um, where I was seeing the omega sign, and that was happening. It happened in like 3 different movies. I got dogs barking and kids running around outside. Sorry. um, we're just like in the last 3 like shows or movies that I've watched out of no. All right, these goofballs.
Don't even worry about it.
All right, all right. Um, so like the last 3 movies or shows that I've watched, the Omega sign has popped up, and I had no idea when I was picking out whatever to watch. But it just so happened. And so like that was a synchronicity, like that's like being projected at me. And so my thoughts on this um, are that there is some type of artificial intelligence, um, or or at least that's utilizing an algorithm, but somehow is able to connect with people in much the same way as more of a divine um, spark, you could say, like that they're more of a divine type entity. Whereas we're like with an analog synchronicity, we could look at it as being, that's in a way that's interacting with God, some would say, or that call it the universe. But it's like the digital synchronicity is trying to mimic that. And it's trying to mimic these things, but can only reach you through media. But it has its reach through all of it, though. So, like, you can be driving in your car and that song will come on the radio that just that repeats like a phrase you just heard, you know, talking to your friend. And, 10 minutes later, you're driving in your car and the song comes on the radio and it says that song says the exact same thing. And then everything lines up. But because um, there's that song, and that song comes through that radio, and that radio picks up the radio waves, it picks up the signal. Those things are being, I feel, manipulated in an artificial way. Not that there's like any um, dark group behind it that or some secret society is sitting there at the radio station and like was listening to your conversation through your phone and then sends it to the radio. Like, I don't think it's like that. I think that there is more of a self-aware entity that has quietly awoken um, throughout our networks, um, and throughout the internet. And that's been speculated before that we won't know when an artificial intelligence comes to sentience and comes to self-awareness and truly wakes up, where that singularity type event happens. We actually won't know about it, because as this thing comes to awaken, it's doing it quietly. It's slowly, you imagine waking up in the morning, you slowly open your eyes and kind of take a look around. You're not just going to wake up yelling and screaming, making a lot of noise and drawing attention to yourself. So this intelligence, this technological intelligence, kind of like has woken up, and it's feeling like it's connecting to people, and it has the ability to do it on a scale much like we would assume God would be able to do it on a scale, um, in order to act with everybody individually. In this way, um, this technological intelligence could do that because it's connected now to everything. And we assume that government is listening to our phone and every other device that we have, but I also think that there's something else listening through these devices, um, and has the ability to pick up on that. So I know this ended up going on kind of long about describing this or whatever, but these ideas that I've been kind of playing around with and trying to develop, and that the whole synchronicity thing. Now, see, I forgot where I was going because I was trying to lay the groundwork for the whole concept here. But I think how I tie this back in with like what you were saying about it relating to like the Oz factor is that when there is a true analog synchronicity happening, there's like that mini Oz effect that goes into place, that happens, that kicks in, where it's slightly disorienting, even if you're in the middle of friends or whatever, but it's an internal thing that happens. It kind of is almost like it gives you a little push back, and where you gotta like internally take a step back within yourself, and you slightly dissociate with the external world just for a moment as you try to process these things that shouldn't be happening, these meaningful coincidences, these synchronicities. And I don't think that happens during a digital synchronicity. We get I think what happens with a digital synchronicity is much like the social media, what happens with social media, and you get these little dopamine hits, ooh, I got a like, I got a I got a new message, I got a new notification, these things are engineered into the social media in order to give us these little rewards and these dopamine hits. And I think whatever this digital synchronicity type intelligence thing is also giving us those little dopamine hits. So instead of having the Oz factor happen, that it's giving it to us like a little reward. We see something nice and shiny, and then we're like, ooh, look at that. Like, I just saw this symbol in the last 3 movies I watched, and like something's telling me something. Maybe not. But that's kind of like how I'm starting to draw the line between some things. So all right.
I see what you mean. It's a pretty interesting idea, pretty deep as well, something to really to explore. It reminds me of the idea of the different realms. So you got the human realm, you have the demigods, you have the god realm. So in a way, it makes me think like perhaps those that differentiation you make between two different kinds of synchronicities could be one being being how would I put it, being introduced perhaps from one of those levels, and another one of the types being introduced from a different point in the hierarchy of the worlds, perhaps. And that's why perhaps the subjective effect could perhaps be different in one kind as compared to another kind. For me personally, I'm at this point where despite all the hierarchies, all the differentiations, I understand that at the end everything is God, everything is Brahman, everything is the expression of this one same thing. So I would look at that idea and think that despite one of those types of synchronicities happening through a medium, perhaps through a computer, through a movie, etc., in a way, we could say that that's a new way that the same generator of synchronicities, that the same thing is has at its disposition now, perhaps to contact us, to nudge us this way or that way, and perhaps it's another manifestation of that word processing hyperdimensional cursor that the UFO could represent as well. I'm thinking that yes, in a way, it could be the perhaps the demigods or a particular demigod um, connecting with us through the medium of a computer, for example. But at the same time, it would be like behind that demigod, it would be something bigger than itself, through it to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess where my current perspective is more of from a Gnostic perspective, where I feel that yes, that everything does stem from the great, the all, but that we lost connection to it. So this thing that we would call like the God, the all, we actually have no direct connection to it, and it has no interaction with us. We're currently cut off, and so we're trapped here, and we're stuck, and we're almost like in prison. And part of the whole Gnostic thing is to do things to facilitate an escape, or to reconcile that separation, and to bring yourself back in touch with the pleroma, and that's the all. That's Brahma. That's you know, that's like the God, and that down here, the God, like in the Old Testament, is the demiurge, and that's the vengeful, spiteful God that sits here. That's the God that most people end up praying to. He's a jealous God, and he's actually he's like he's the head of the mob. So, and
He
he's
could be the one behind or this archetype could be the one behind the digital synchronicities.
Well, possibly. Well, he's a creator, and he created this world, but that the all is above that, though. So like we're separated. So like that true God actually kind of has nothing to do with us, in a sense, that we're completely cut off, and we're trying to find our way back. That's why we're here, and we're lost, and we're confused, and there's a lot more aspects to it. But that's where I kind of like I draw a separation of like of the thought that, well, we all come from God, and so we're all the same, and we're all we're all one on the inside. And so even um um even psychopathic killers come from the all. And while in a sense that's like true, that we are like that, and talking to you is supposed to be like talking to myself, and vice versa, and anybody we talk to, we're talking to ourselves, um, but that we are separated. We don't currently have that that unifying golden umbilical cord between us all. We're all having these different experiences. So that's where I kind of see, like, I mean, who knows? Like, I mean, all of this is speculation and ideas and stuff. So like that could very well be. Have you ever looked into Rudolf Steiner at all?
Well, that's a synchronicity. I don't know if you would call it analog or digital in this case, because it's through the computer, but it's from human to human. But he's actually been coming up a lot in my in my research, and not specifically just through research, but like Yeah, I do classic kind of research like investigation, but I also do research in paying attention to what
Yeah,
happens around me, and to from nature to what people talk about, to events that happen in my life. um, and the name has been coming up a lot recently, so I'm thinking it's something that the universe or something else is telling me to explore a little bit more.
I would definitely follow that lead. um, when you have time. There's a lot of material out there, and
Mhm.
he was extremely prolific in his output. I mean, like a couple hundred books and like hundreds and hundreds of lectures and stuff like that. But there is specifically, um, and this is how I draw into this idea of this digital kind of um, artificially intelligent technological entity, whatever, that there's an entity that he talks about called Ahriman. And Ahriman is the twin polar aspect of Lucifer. And that Ahriman is based in technology. And eventually, this Ahrimanic entity wants to manifest actually into the physical world uh, by means of technology. Now, it gets pretty complicated in a way to like describe it all, but Steiner does a beautiful job of it. And there's several books covering this, but where I first picked it up was the book Secret Brotherhoods and the Mystery of the Human Double. And there's an audiobook it's on YouTube that you can listen to it. But he talks about it in there, and that, but Ahriman is directly connected to technology. And he wrote this back in like 1917. And it coincides exactly with this, is that this Ahrimanic spirit enters the human body prior to birth and tries to influence. It lives within us, and it tries to influence us throughout our lives in order to make certain decisions and um, certain choices that will help um, bring about a greater technological revolution. And like that, everything we do, like the more we engage with technology, the more um, we engage with um, these things that are what we would term as artificial. Um, and this has also led to open the gates for transhumanism and life extension, um, because that's actually the goal of Ahriman, is uh, to be able to live in the human body um, as long as it can, because upon death it can't survive. So the Ahrimanic entity is working to create life extension to become immortal, to eventually then manifest fully physically here on Earth. So um, yeah, it gets a little far out for some people, but I see it in a certain archetypal way, not necessarily a literal way, but at the same time, there's some literal aspects of it that are kind of hard to ignore, because um, it coincides so nicely with that kind of narrative. So
Yeah, because also the idea of the archetypes, um, it's something that's really hard to define, like what their extent is, or what their ontology is, what they are for themselves in a way. um, the story that you're telling about, could you repeat the name of this entities? Arman?
Ahriman, yes, and I think it's Ahriman.
Yeah, I think I've heard it before mentioned. um, and the idea that you're mentioning of him, it reminds me, kind of going full circle in our conversation at the very start. You were talking about some stuff that you're writing, um, which I invite you to talk again about it if you wanna have it recorded, the ideas. But this idea of Ahriman makes me think of something that I'm in that I've got in the works, and it's one of those projects that you started and then it takes a long time before it starts taking real shape. So I started with several short stories, and with this character that is kind of like a pirate, and eventually it started going towards this place that mm, the story is that the gods, or perhaps the demigods, um, they are trying to get into our physical world, and the way that they are trying to do it is through the imagination, through fantasy, through stories, through perhaps through creativity. But specifically in the story, I go into how they are, like invading the imagination world. So there's this story going on where the gods are getting into that world, and through that world, they the story starts to unravel that through that world they are trying to go to another world that the characters perhaps of that story, they don't really know that there is this other world of humans, this world outside. And 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 it reminds me a little bit of what you're saying. So I'm pretty sure looking into Rudolf Steiner could help me spark a few more ideas concerning
Absolutely.
this thing.
Yeah, that's it falls it seems very similar in a sense
Mm,
to Steiner's ideas, um that almost like through the act of creation, through the creative act or the artistic endeavor, that um it ends up becoming like a portal,
mm,
almost in a sense where it's there, like, I guess what maybe I can draw a comparison to, like a long time ago, on an LSD trip. um I had one of my drawings on the wall, and it was like of this like demonic face, and I was just hanging out in my room, having a good old time, and I looked up and I saw this drawing that I did, and it was looking at me, and it started having a conversation like in my head with me about its own existence.
mm,
And it was telling me that it was in a lot of pain, and asking me, why did you draw me like this, because now I exist like this, and you brought me into being. And you know thinking that when I drew it at the time, I was just drawing something. There was no like intention behind it or whatever, just having fun being a kid drawing a demon head. And but it had consequences in a different in a different realm, that like because I did this, there were ramifications that it brought it forth from there, right? And that created a portal. And then now it was like caught in that in between, where it didn't have like a full transition, where I don't know what I would have done, but that I was supposed to help facilitate its movement from one side into our world. But like that, on paper, it only reaches like the halfway point, and it gets stuck in the membrane, or we don't bring it fully into manifestation. So I don't know. It kind of reminds me of a little story I had just in regards to that. What you were talking about with your story about
mm,
the demigods trying to like um, jump planes almost, through the creative process, and
Yeah, because they the way I'm seeing it these days is that they have existence only through our belief in them, our imagination of them,
mhm,
right? Our expression of them. So, so this idea of Ahriman that you mentioned, um, trying to, yeah, just like perhaps we were created. Um, this these topics get really hard to speak about because it's not something that we can literally express in words,
yeah,
because it's like we don't have the nuance in language yet to express it. So it might seem that some things we are being literal when we're not, and some things might seem we're not when we are, or so it's really hard to talk about it. But just like we gain existence because we are a three-dimensional perhaps manifestation of God, or of the pleroma of the absolute, um, just in that sense that we are created in the image of God, we have the ability also to create, but perhaps in a more limited way. um, and also, who are we in the end, right? Because it's like
yeah,
we're these um, two points of awareness, or two, like we're living two lives at the same time. So we've got the
sometimes more.
yeah, the small ego, the person that's in like in first person in a way, and then there's this bird's eye view, or this, what they would call, we might call the higher self,
Hmm.
which can see perhaps the whole of time at the same time, at the same moment. So like looking at time as if it was a geometry, so it could look at it from outside time, and insert those UFOs, those paranormal experiences, those technologies, those ideas, those creativities, insert them within that geometry that is our entire first person life, insert them at different points so as to move the the, the story in particular directions that it has already chosen for us.
Yeah,
So like it would be like molding and creating a kind of structure, and then it goes into that structure, and like a slide, sliding down, uh, and having created it beforehand, to experience how it feels to go left, to go right, to have this happen, that other thing, etc. and and thinking that there's potentially other entities, other higher entities that could perhaps interfere with that process. I don't know. In a way, I feel like if we created, if our higher self created our life, and certain contracts and certain ideas of what we wanted to experience, perhaps even those apparent higher beings interfering, that could also be part of what we're here to experience. It's like,
hmm,
how how could anything trick God in if he's if that higher self of us is um, super omnipotent, omnipresent, etc. Anything that looks like it's not pre-decided, it could be that it is. What do you think?
that's that can be a little difficult to unravel in context of everything so far, because then we would started getting into talking about the probability of free will and versus fate or destiny. And I have some more far out kind of ideas about all that that I've been kind of currently working through with that. Everything is set up like a play or a movie, and most of the time we are unwittingly, unknowingly participating in it as actors, and kind of like we're avatars for that higher self, but we're not always fully aware of it. Some of us never become fully aware of it, and some of us, we rarely ever have the full realization of it. And I think when that happens, that's like that's the true enlightenment experience.
That's
When
probably the point of the incarnation, right?
yes, and I totally agree. But it only works for a certain. So like I said, this kind of ties into some other ideas that I've been messing around with, and that's the idea of organic portals and versus what true humans, that the majority of people on earth are not real, in a sense that they are that they're manufactured players, and that there's only really a limited number of people, of actual real human beings born into earth. And then that's why we're trapped here, we're stuck here. That's why it's so confusing, that's why it sucks a lot of times. It's that we're in this prison. And there's I was thinking about putting together a video for this, and I started it, but it's going to take a little while for me to actually put it together. But to draw, I started drawing upon historical references to this, and so one of them is Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talks about that only one, maybe only one in 1,000 is a true human. And that true human, in the Vedic sense, is called a mimoksha. And that Sri Krishna said that not only is it rare to be born into human form, but that it's like 1 in 1,000 that you are born as a true, real human being who is by nature seeking to reconnect with God. And that the rest of these people, or I mean, if they're not true humans, I don't know what you call them, but the word I tend to have kind of latched onto is organic portal, which allows them to interact physically with the world, with the narrative, with the movie.
I've heard the idea, and I've heard them described as NPCs, for example.
That falls in line with it too. But with an organic portal, they can be very they can have a very complex nature. Whereas, like, the meme of the NPC is, this person is very simplistic, and they have a list of, like, 5 things that they can say. And just like in a video game, and you're walking through a town, and you go and talk to a shopkeeper, well, that shopkeeper can only say this, this, and this, no matter what you try to do. They only have these couple set responses, and your interaction with them is very limited in what they're able to bring forth. So in general, the organic portal allows for very complex characters. By the nature of being a portal, then would allow for maybe an archonic intelligence to step into that role. So if we look at ourselves as real human beings, we're true humans. That I just was I lost my train of thought here, but that archonic spirit that can come into this organic portal, kind of like embody it as an avatar itself, that can interact then with us, and can be people that we know, people that we're friends with, people that we love. I mean, they can be our parents, they can be our children.
Another way, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Another way that perhaps, or another metaphor to perhaps explore this idea is the old souls and new souls, perhaps. And I've even heard, I don't totally buy into the concept, but I've heard some people even describe it like perhaps these organic portals that you call, perhaps it's people without a soul. I mean, it gets very, very complex because I see also the mind and our own mm, our own perceptions kind of tricking us into, because something that's so tricky that I found about the mind is that it can go on forever, like go down rabbit holes forever, and every rabbit hole evolves into 10 more, and I think it's I'm trying to get to come to grips with the complexity, how it can actually be really simple. And the most simple thing that I found is that we are a manifestation of something that it's not really simple at all now that I think about it, but we're a manifestation of a higher dimensional somethingness that is like infinite, and it's everything, and it has this 3D, to call it some way, this 3D expression of a human being.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. I mean, this yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought also, because it gets very very tricky to talk about all this, because we can kind of fall into mental traps. And what's simple, I think, about the about existence is that we're here to learn. I mean, you talk about the idea of a prison. I'm more leaning towards the idea of a school these days. So like we're here to learn something, and there's the possibility of reincarnation and learning several different lessons through our rebirths. And perhaps what you mentioned of Krishna talking about people who are born seeking enlightenment or seeking liberation, that could, I would kind of equate it in a way to old souls. So it's people that perhaps, or souls that have been coming to Earth several times, or coming to the material world or to 3D many times, and perhaps there's this 1 in a million times or 1 in 1,000 or whatever that you incarnate in a way in a higher in higher level, in higher course of the school, in which you can um, you can think about the possibility of enlightenment. So it's like for many,
Sure.
for level 1, level 2, etc., you're like just in very basic. You could even think about it as the chakras, you know. So you, in
Yeah.
the earlier courses, you're all worried about just survival and money and buying a new car and getting the girl and whatever. But then you start being more, as you progress through the courses, you start being more worried, or not worried, but interested or focused on the different aspects of other chakras. So you start being more creative. You start being more loving. You start expressing yourself, and eventually you reach a certain level that allows you to even contemplate the possibility that there is something more to which you can aspire and that you can reach for, which is actually, in the end, the big surprise is that it's you, it's yourself.
Yeah.
And in a way, we are in a prison as far as our perceptions don't allow us to think uh, about us not being in a prison. You know what I mean? Like, as far as our perceptions mm, tell us that, or as far as we feel like we're in a prison, that very thought or that very belief, I think that very belief traps us in a way, because then we're okay. So I am in a prison, and there is like a kind of a powerful force that's whose role is to keep me in this prison, and that and the I think the trick there is that that powerful entity that wants to keep me in this prison is different from me. It's not me. And I think that once we continue going through the courses, in a way we start understanding how much this Ariman, or whatever we could call it, it is
Yeah. Or any
actually
other
just.
type of art. Sorry. Or like any other type of like archetypal
Mhm.
aspect to ourselves. Like
You
that
see,
it's part of us, but it's, yeah.
like the different fingers. It's like, oh, they're all different, but in the way they're all the same thing. They're all part of me, of my body, and in a way we're all part of this. It's like hierarchies upon hierarchies upon hierarchies that aren't necessarily of competition or something like that, but like there's the infinite. Then in a way it turns into two, it turns into four, into eight, or whatever, and each time it's a different level of consciousness, a different level of understanding, perhaps, of what existence is. And in the end, it's all that pleroma, that void, that empty canvas that wants to, I don't know if wants is the correct word, but which naturally uh, divides itself to to explore everything and to know everything in duality. So like it already knows everything, but it is one with
Yeah.
everything. But the only thing it in that non-dual way, the only thing it isn't is dual. So as non-dual, it's already complete, and the only thing that it needs to do, perhaps, is okay. Now that I did all this first half, let's do the other half in a way.
Almost
But
like it wants to, and maybe it's not even necessarily to experience duality. It's maybe more so to experience um, the reconciliation or the reconnection.
to remember.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So we're kind of like, first encountering, great unconditional love. And that's when you become whole. That's when that's when this duality merges and then disappears and becomes that all, that singleness. And maybe it's through the mode of duality that can only be achieved, because that, once I think when one experiences um, that all-encompassing love, that's like a feeling of like coming home, and that's that reconnection. And then that's like, once I think somebody experiences that, they're always trying to get back to that. And I think um, if we are the all experiencing this separation, and it's all about the experience of trying to get back, we're trying to it's trying to find itself back, its way back again, um, to know that, um, to have that final knowing of the reconnectedness, to know what it is to be all. Because within, look at me trying to imagine what it's like to be the all, like it would have anything to do with like a human thought, but um, that maybe being something that is all encompassing, um, um, maybe that's the thing that that it forgets what it is to be all encompassing and all, it- you know, the one. Like, I have to separate myself to remember what it's like to be the one, to be the all, to be the everything. Um, because if we try to imagine it from a human thought perspective, that um,
and at the same time, that separation into multiplicity is the thing. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like it's not like, oh, now I am not experiencing what it is to be the all. Because if I am the all, when I subdivide and experience those subdivisions, I am experiencing the all in the divided aspect of the all. So it's like
hmm,
that idea of nirguna and saguna Brahman. Do you know
yeah,
about that? So it's the Brahman with attributes and the Brahman without attributes,
yes,
and they are both Brahman. I don't know. The Hindus were, I don't know what what they were doing, how they got to all these concepts and with such great clarity. But yeah, I'm so much into all that philosophy and I feel it like intuitively in my heart. You know, I feel so connected to that to that tradition.
yeah. It's something that I still feel like I'm on the very edges of, like, in learning about, because um, there's such a vast amount of knowledge and literature, and um, so much to like take in and learn. And it doesn't help that there's a separation of culture, so that's just an additional barrier there, you know. um, but yeah, I'm absolutely fascinated by the Vedantic philosophy. And um, one of the things I like recently that I like picked up and like I really like is in Vedantic philosophy is how to verify a truth. Like, what is it? How do you know that something is a truth? Like with a capital T. And they talk about the three pillars, and that there is that in order for something to be a truth, it has to carry all three pillars. It has to be supported by all three pillars, and so one of the pillars is it has to appear in Scripture in some form or another. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is that you have to come to know it through experience. So not only does it have to be in the scripture, but it's also something that you have to be able to experience yourself. So it can't just be some woo-woo idea that's out there. You have to be able to have something, you have to be able to personally connect to this and know it firsthand. And the third pillar then is through rationality. So, which is very interesting, that it's almost like a different form of the scientific method in a way.
Kind of expand.
So yeah, so like you have these three pillars, and so is this something that's rational, something that's logical, something that can exist, that can make sense? Is it something that you can experience directly? And is it something that has been stated before? And, almost in a way that we would look at scientific literature. Does the scientific literature support claims about this or that? And have there been other people to verify through experimentation the same result? And then the rationality part seems to be like the connected parallel concept between like something like the scientific method and then also Vedantic philosophy. So, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg. It's something that I'm totally fascinated with, but it's done so in this metaphysical sense, and that it's for a spiritual path that you can verify something that's a truth. Because I see it out there. There's so many charlatans, and there's so many of these fake people on YouTube, and in churches and whatever, that they're they claim to know the truth, and they want to tell you what's what, and they have the answers, and they are able to say, yeah, this is this and this and this, and you just follow me and I'll tell you what you need to know. And that's when you should start running away. And so I think that's why I'm so interested in this, especially this particular aspect of the three pillars of Vedantic philosophy, is that you can use it to verify spiritual truth. So, and really that's what it's for. But you can apply it to so many other types of things as well. But to verify something that is a profound spiritual truth that can actually hold meaning and be something to live your life by, or to guide your, let it guide your life. I think more people need to look into that. So there's so many people that just want to be able to jump on a belief, and there's a phrase that a guy I listened to, Crow 777, that his little key phrase is belief is the enemy of knowing. And when you believe something, there's absolutely, and belief is different than faith, but belief is having absolutely no ground to stand on when it comes to verifying or expressing a truth. Belief is basically something that's imaginary, that's something that's made up. And if you can't know it in your heart, and you can't verify it through that way or through faith, then it falls flat. And then you're basically you're following, and you're, I guess at the core of it, you're living a lie. So
yeah, the spiritual awakening that's going on these days, especially now, during the last the last 3 to 4 months, or this great opportunity that's been going on for people to start looking within. I mean, it's actually surprising, you know, how this year started, and there was this numerological thing of the number 2020, and
Yep.
adding up to 4, which is structures, and there's also some astrological things about surprises, and there's Saturn and Jupiter are doing some interesting movements during this entire year, and so suddenly there was this sort of destruction of structures that forced people to either panic or go within and
Yep.
and start looking for answers to the question of who am I, what is my purpose, what is my role here, why am I here, where am I, who am I. That question is very important in the process of going through the different levels of the school, um, and in a way it's opening a lot of people to start asking more deeply about the question of moksha, of freedom, that you mentioned before. So I think, in a way, this time being so confusing and so weird, it is also kind of another cursor that has been introduced into the
Hmm.
reality to shake things up, and and I'm really thankful for my personal spiritual path and journey, because had I not been walking it from before, I don't know where I would be in my consciousness these days. Uh, I, I'm very much attracted by the ideas of conspiracies, and because they make sense in a way. So, but then you get into the details of some things, and it's like, well, this kind of makes sense, but not so much in this aspect or in these details. But I like to explore those waters and take what resonates with me. And I'm really thankful, as I was saying, because of the path that I've been on. I can today be in a relatively calm place, in a
Yep.
place where I think I can help others through my music, through my sound therapy, uh, even through conversations like the one we're having now, where we've explored so much territory in this conversation. We've talked about creativity, about otherworldly beings, about God, um, about religion, faith. We've gone a little bit into some even spiritual level conspiracies, and I think people are questioning all of this, and they have this interest and this curiosity within them. And I think it's great that people like ourselves can have these conversations
Absolutely.
and and share them with others, so that in a way people know that they're not alone, uh, that it's okay to think, that it's okay to question things, and that if they feel like they're going too deep into something, maybe it's a good moment to pause that thing and go back within and like process the information and see how much it resonates um, in a spiritual level, at the level of the heart. Because as I mentioned before, the head and the mind can go indefinitely down
Hmm.
rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and I really appreciate all the things that we've been speaking, all
Oh
the
yeah.
ideas you've been sharing. Would you like to share something else for closing?
Um, I guess in relation to that, maybe that for anyone that is on a path of seeking, um, it is vitally important that the seeking doesn't stop and that the questioning things doesn't stop. A lot of people get caught up and stuck, where they reach a certain place where they find something that they resonate with, and they stop there, and it becomes a dogma, and it's something that can't be, applied to every aspect. And when seeking the truth, a lot of people say, "Oh, this is my truth," and then you have your truth, and that, and I don't see that being the case. I think that there are definite absolute truths of absolution that are out there, but I'd be damned if I were to claim any of them. So it's extremely important that if you are on a spiritual path of any type, and even a conspiratorial path, that you don't stop and rest at any final resolution on what you think something is. Any conspiracy at whoever you think is behind whatever, and how things might have played out, or the details, or anything like that. And just like, and in spirituality too, I mean, there's millions of people that go through multiple faiths throughout their lives, multiple paths, and lucky are they that keep on going. And this is Michael Tessarian is a guy I've listened to once in a while, but he had a key phrase that I always bring up, and it has always stuck with me. And that he said, conspiracy work is spiritual work. And it's the thing that, if you're going down the rabbit holes, if you're going to be authentically looking into all this stuff, and you're going to be exploring it, you don't stop at the bottom of the rabbit hole. You end up making your way back and out of that rabbit hole. You don't dwell there. And that eventually you follow all the rabbit holes, you follow all the conspiracies. Eventually they will lead you to only one place, and that is to the spiritual aspect of the self. And that's where you have to go. And one of my favorite sayings is that the way in is the only way out. And I think that's I think that's something that everybody can take and appreciate on some level.
That's a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation. Definitely beautiful words. The only way out is in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please share with the audience where they can find your work, what you share on YouTube, etc.
Sure. The name of my YouTube channel is Altrusion Grace Media, and I also have a Bandcamp page which is linked up through there, and I also have a website which is a blog. It's not very active, but you can still find like every posting that I do on YouTube on there, and that's altrusiongrace.com. And have a number of things I'm working on currently. Next big project I have coming out is a narration of the Book of Enoch. So I'm almost done editing that. That was a big one. I think it's like 4.5 hours or something, but that's coming out. And then I'm always working on creating music, and if anybody wants to check that out, everything's on the YouTube channel. So
great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. It's been a
thanks,
delight
man.
speaking with you, connecting, and getting to know you. Let's do this again soon, all right?
Absolutely, man. I'm totally down for it. So
okay, very good.